Right. Well, welcome to our latest ERI seminar. My name is Charles Lee. I'm the academic co-director of Tetimu Whakaora Taiao, the Environmental Research Institute. And today I have the pleasure to welcome Dr. Nick Lim and Dr. Guilherme. It's a long name. I'm sorry, I have to pull my phone out. Guilherme Weigert Cassales. They're both from the Artificial Intelligence Institute, working with Professor Albert Buffet. So today they're going to talk about using machine learning for flood prediction and for forestry, and both of them are working as part of the Taiao project. Without further ado, I'd like to pass the mic over to Nick.
Thank you, Charles. All right. Good morning, everyone. As Charles mentioned, I'm Nick, and I'm with the AI Institute. And over the last 3 years, we've been working on trying to use machine learning for flood forecasting and for a short term. So one of the key motivations behind this project was the Queen's Birthday flood back in 2021, and since then, the cost of floods and the incidences of floods have been increasing. So what used to be once a decade or once every 50 years, and even because with the recent Cyclone Gabrielle, once every 100 years, is pretty much happening at increasing frequencies. And the costs associated to these events are getting astronomical. For example, in the case of Cyclone Gabrielle, the cost of the insurance was estimated somewhere on the low bound to be about $7.8 billion, and the upper bound to be about $50 billion. All right, cool. Yeah, so not even considering the financial costs, the costs of floods to human lives and how much it disrupt the lives of people, it becomes a very important problem. It becomes a very key thing that becomes of interest to the regional councils and to the government. Right. So from the 2021 incidents, we are looking at the floods, trying to predict the floods on 3 major rivers in the Coromandel region, namely the Taira River, the Kaurenga River, and the Opitonui River. And with those 3 rivers, we have what called 2 rain gauges that are associated with those catchment areas. So our initial push for the research is trying to use just this limited data and to see how far in advance we are able to predict the flood incidences. In terms of machine learning methods, there are many machine learning methods that are available to machine learning practitioners for time series forecasting. So some of you may be familiar with linear regressions, which is just what called simple models to predict what called the future values based on the values of the rivers using a linear regression. And using a linear regression, some of you might familiar with more advanced methods such as ARIMA. So that uses a statistical model to break down to decompose the predictions to multiple components, and then predict those components separately. Or some of the traditional machine learning methods, so of random forest, support vector machines, or gradient boosted ensembles. For our research, we will more focus on the neural networks and on the neural networks method. And one of the key reasons why we were focusing on on the neural network methods is that while we found that traditional methods can give us good results for very short-term forecasting for up to an hour, it starts it starts to fall away when try to predict something that's longer term for about 3 hours or 6 hours. So there is a fundamental limitations to what's capable in the that's capable by traditional methods in order to in the context of forecasting the river levels for these three rivers. Another shortcoming that we also found is that just depending on just a while using the neural network methods, we are able to get a better forecast horizon of the river levels. There is still a limit to how far we can go. So we were able to push the results up to about 3 hours. Good forecasting up to 3 hours of 3 hours forecast horizon, but beyond 6 and 9 hours, it starts becoming less accurate and we starts missing the flood events. So for this reason, we worked with MetService to basically and MetService has provided us with an API so that we have the direct access to the rain radar. So what we found here is that there is a nice correlation between the reflectance value on the our reflectance value in the radar and the rain gauge, the amount of rain that was measured by the rain gauges. So using that, we are able to we are basically the idea behind that is that using the conditions of the clouds, our theory is that we should be able to get a better forecast horizon of the better understanding of the rain condition over a longer period of in the region. Okay. So doing that, it kind of improves the model. So this graph on the left here is the 6 hours prediction. There are many lines values on the left. These are just different variants of our models, but this shows that that with the improvements that in the additional rain radar data, we're able to get up to about 6 hours prediction horizon. One of the improvement that I want to highlight here is that we also noticed that the river rising events and the flood events tends to be quite rare, and most of the periods the region doesn't receive rain, and because the river is pretty much usually either stable or is in decline. So one of the modifications that we did for the training of the neural network is to emphasize the predictions during the events where there's actually river activities. So the alpha value on the left here is basically the amount of emphasis we applied to the to the training during the river activities. And this and from our results, the same, we show that we're able to see that by emphasizing mainly on those events with river activities, we're able to get improvements in our results. One key shortcoming about with the traditional neural networks is that neural networks tend to give us just a point forecast. So rather than giving us a distribution of the predictions, it just gives us a singular value, and there's no measure of uncertainty. There are no measures of uncertainties to those predictions. Fortunately, there are approaches in in deep learning, such as what I call one of these methods. Oops, I'm just going to sign out. Sorry, I got something popping up. So, sorry, let me catch my words again. Right. So there are methods in deep learning such as the Bayesian long short-term memory networks that basically, rather than giving us a point forecast, they try to predict a distribution of the distribution of the forecast, which because with some predictive uncertainties in there embedded in it, and the predictions as well. The graph on the right there is some results of the forecast. The orange lines are the mean values of the predictions. The red and green dotted lines are the 95 and 95% intervals respectively, and the blue lines is the ground truth. The ground truth that's been shifted by 6 hours. So this is a 6 hours forecast. 6 hours forecast of the river levels. Okay. So going closer, we can see some distributions of the predictive intervals and how reliable it is. So the graph on the left is a histogram of the predictive errors, and for 2 different cases. So one is when we consider when the river is high, and second when the river is across the whole predictive range, and the bottom lines, the bottom graphs are when we consider rivers in the top 85%, when there's river activities, when the river is about at the top 85% range of where they are. And in both cases, the cumulative histogram and the QQ plots pretty much shows that the errors are roughly normal. There is still an open question we're still trying to work here, is that how do we actually quantify what is a good prediction? What should actually be the goal of the network? Should it produce a reliable point estimate, or should the predictive interval, or is it more important that the predictive interval be reliable? For example, if it's possible to get very good predictive intervals, but with very large variance with very large variance, and in which case it will cover the 95% interval anyway. Or we can have something that's more accurate in his point estimate, but with a narrower variance in the prediction, in which case 95% interval might not be as reliable. So there's an open question that still needs answering by us, and something that becomes a bit of a engineering problem for the decision makers. Okay. So some of you might know about ChatGPT. And over the last 6 months, 8 months, ChatGPT has kind of blown up. So ChatGPT is based on a neural network called transformers, and like languages, time series prediction is a sequential type of task. So it was speculated that transformers such as ChatGPT, such as what ChatGPT is based on, can perform really well for time series tasks as well. But there are some shortcomings of just blindly applying transformers to the task. So transformers tends to be very data hungry. If you do not have enough data, transformers do not actually scale well to it. we need to have a lot of data before transformers perform what we call adequately. So this is some of the results that we tried using just using a base transformer and to predict the river levels. And from what we can see here, is that it does not perform as well as the LSTMs, which was the baseline model that we used to compare against. Fortunately, there are bespoke transformers that are designed for time series prediction. So this transformer is called ETS former. You can think of ETS former as a transformer that has inspiration from ARIMA. So rather than looking so within the transformer there is what we call a attention network. So they basically, rather than using what we call a basic attention network, they basically use the inspiration from ARIMA. Basically use the long-term attention, short-term attention, and some exponential decay in the attention, in order to and then apply that to transformers. And with that improvements, some of these transformers are competitive to the baseline methods, or even better than what we have. Yeah. There are still a lot of work to do, you see. So the deeper the network is, the more complex the network is, usually the harder it is to interpret and to understand. So there is a need to come up with methods for explainabilities in transformers, especially in the areas of time series. Namely, why do they come up with the prediction, and what are the factors that causes the neural network method to come up with that prediction. There is also the need to like similar to the Bayesian LSTM, to come up with to produce some predictive uncertainties in the results, and to produce a distribution of the predictions. Okay. So this is just some recent results that we got. So this was us trying out our models based on the river levels and the flood and the rain gauges they were called that during Auckland Day and the cyclone Gabrielle flood. So although the model is not trained for these events, and some of the river levels that they have seen during Cyclone Gabrielle is unprecedented. Pretty much none of our data points have exceeded 3.5 meters in the throughout the training, but our model was able to the neural network models were able to predict what call river levels that are extreme, such as this. Right. I'm not sure if this is relevant to say. So this is just a background, inner workings of what's happening with the flood prediction system. We obtain the data from the river levels and the river levels and the radar from both MetServices and in the future the regional councils, and then we process them, and then we visualize them. So this is a visualization tool that we are developing for the regional councils. And no, okay, there is a video. All right. Is it playing? Oh, shit, no. My bad. Yeah, sorry. The video couldn't play. I think it's fine. All right. So that's that from my part. I shall pass on to my colleague Guilherme. So sorry for taking up so much time. Right. And still steal.
Thank you.
Right.
Hey, hi everyone. My name is Guilherme. I am often asked if I'm from Pakistan, India, or Iran, but it turns out I'm from Brazil. Yeah, my name is also a huge controversy case. Even Brazilians from some regions have difficulties pronouncing it the right way, basically because of the H. It gives some trouble in the pronunciation, but no worries, that's fine. So yeah, I'm here to present a little bit about the data science that we are using for plantation forests, specifically in the forest flows use case, which is done in partnership with Scion and yeah, the forest flows project, which is also located in Scion. So a brief contextualization is that in New Zealand, we have planted forests and they are very important for our economy. So we have almost 40,000 jobs that people working in this area. A lot, 1% of our GDP, more than 1%, comes from plantation forests. So that's an important business. And in addition, it kind of regulates the climate and it has some impacts on the environment on the nearby areas. And basically, that's the goal of the project, is understanding the water usage in plantation forests. So this is very important. And how do we make sure that we are getting as much as we can, that we are optimizing our profits and minimizing our expenses and all that? So basically, there's a huge infrastructure with many sensors. For example, we can monitor tree growth with Dendrometer sensors. We can monitor water usage with sap flow meter, which is basically how much water the tree is consuming. We can also monitor the soil moisture or how much water there is in the soil, or yeah, so things like that. Also some other stuff in the soil like the nitrate sensor and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of sensors around these forests and they generate a lot of data. So this is a picture that kind of depicts how big the infrastructure is. You can see that there's kind of internal data from this project that's been generated. There's also data from NIWA. So it's using data from different sources and trying to combine this in order to extract this knowledge. And it turns out there's more than 200 sensors per forest. And there's like 6 or 7 forests in this project. So there's a lot of sensors. They have a 5-minute frequency. So every 5 minutes, it's getting readings from the things it's monitoring. And then this data goes through a very large thing with stations and then going to servers, going through the data provision system and the live database. And the question then is, why do we monitor so many things? Why do we expend so many resources in gathering this data only? Up to this point, we are just gathering and we're not analyzing. And the goal is to create this forest hydrology model. And then there are physical models that can simulate these water fluxes, but they are quite they take a long time to process. And maybe they are, one idea is to maybe machine learning models will give an approximate solution in a much shorter time once the models are trained. So there is a clear objective. And then it's kind of looking at the same problem from a different angle, and that gives you other opportunities that I'm going to talk later. For example, two kind of secondary objectives is also to promote positive impacts and mitigate negative impacts of planted forests. And here is the irony of having this talk right after Nick talked about the flood. So in floods, you are trying to predict or you are trying to forecast when there will be too much water and we don't have the capacity to deal with it. And in Forest Flows project, it's the opposite. We are trying to understand why water is disappearing, basically. Because these plantation forests, they have a huge intake of water to make them grow. I'm sure you understand it a lot better than me. And then the second objective is this kind of policy incentive. So things that aid the government and the agencies to kind of promote the adoption of better water practice or water forestry regimes. Yeah. So everything, like I'm going to do something that's forbidden. I'm going to go back. So in this, you have data from different sources, you have different sensors, you have different agencies. So everything goes to one place. Usually, you would create a big data lake or a data warehouse where everything goes inside there, and we try to get some knowledge when everything is together. That was quite useful, and it was the kind of state of art for a long time. Unfortunately, that creates a big bottleneck because you have one data science team and they are responsible for treating every data, for consuming every data, for generating all the reports and so on. And then nowadays there's a data mesh. It's a new 4 years old data architecture. And it's a distributed data architecture. So data is now, instead of going everything to a lake, it's kind of, you have small ponds over your whole database, and each pond is responsible for producing kind of higher quality and summarized data. So instead of one data science team, you would have several that are distributed for each thing, and that allows them to be more like experts or have more expertise in that domain. In this example, it's like you have the users, you have the artists, and you have podcasts. So things are separated by team, and people that know, so whoever is dealing with artists know every artist, and they can do a better job in filtering and curating this data and giving reports regarding the artists. And the same happens for the users and for the podcasts. So basically, the data mesh is built upon these 4 principles. One is the domain-oriented, so you have these ponds instead of a big lake. That kind of makes it more agile because there's less data to understand, there's less data to process, and you can generate higher quality data inside your domain. In the data mesh, we treat data as a product. So data is not these like items that have value, but the value is hidden. Now data is a product and it has value by itself because it's already been processed, it's already been extracted knowledge, and it's made available for every other service in a way that they can readily use it. They don't have to clean it, they don't have to pre-process, it's just get the data, use for whatever you want. Also, they have this self-serve platform, which is basically the infrastructure that makes everything work together. So yeah, in this case, the user's profile can be accessed in the podcasts. Like it's providing data regarding the users for the podcasts. And then you have the federated governance, which is kind of this governance, this group of people, this committee that decides on the policies, like do we need to apply this privacy measure, or do we need to apply this security process before making the data available? So basically, the federated governance kind of makes the rules of how data is going around and how each domain interacts with another. So this is the data mesh very briefly. Why is this interesting? because we can have different organizations here. So we can have the kind of the Niwa pond, which is a very big pond, but still in this case, it would be a pond. And then you have Sion pond, and then you can have another organization like the AI Institute pond. And then we are exchanging data in a way that's efficient, in a way that's secure, and yeah, that brings a lot of benefits. So this is the backbone of everything. It's the data mesh. What Nick showed, the diagram, it's basically how the data mesh is organized. Yeah. So this is to understand a little bit the how things are working below the hood. And then going on, the dendrometer sensor. I suppose most of you know, or maybe I'm supposing wrong, but anyway, I'll try to be brief. So the dendrometer is this is a real picture, this is the diagram, and this is the reading of the one dendrometer specifically. And basically this needle is kind of measuring the tension that the tree trunk is making. Basically when it expands or when it contracts, the needle moves, and then this movement is measured, and we can kind of estimate how much the tree is growing, at least laterally, not vertically. And then basically this is translated to this measurement, which is in millimeters. And this is over the months of September, October, November, up to May. You can see that it has a trend, but there are some weird things if you consider that something is growing, because sometimes it's shrinking, like this part. And then, okay, let's see closer what's happening. So this is the same dendrometer, but in the beginning of September only. This is a week. So it has this cycle of growing and then shrinking and growing and shrinking and growing and shrinking. And you can see that the overall trend is growing, but you have this cyclic behavior. And then even more specifically, if we get only this day, we can see that this is the behavior it's showing. Also, one challenge in this is that this is the dendrometer one day in early September. So this is the behavior, it shrinks and then grows and so on. And this is the same dendrometer, but in March. So it reaches bigger, the values are different, but the amount of units in both charts are the same. So while this reached only this height, this was higher, and the kind of behavior, this is kind of a logarithm thing, and this is more like linear. So it can change quite a lot along the year. And then that's what we want to forecast first, because if we can forecast the growth, we can start to understand what are the driving factors. And then we are using this advanced machine learning that Nick just covered, and I'm going to skip. So you have the LSTMs, the transformers, and the exponential, the smoothing transformers, short for ETS former. Yeah, so this is one example of the preliminary experiments we got. And here we are using, okay, so there might be a missing context here. So every forest is divided into plots, and every plot has around 4 dendrometer sensors spread over the plot. And so, for example, this, I cannot say which forest, I suppose, because of the privacy issues, but this forest has more than 20 plots, and we use half of them to train. So we are using around 40-50 trees to train our model. That gives us 3 million samples. And then we use test set each sensor individually. So we train with half, and then we test on one sensor specific. And this is one of the sensors being forecast. It looks good in this scale, but if we zoom in, then it's not perfect. easy to see. There's a lot of room for improvement, but it kind of captures the general behavior of the sensor. And then most of the time it's under predicting, under forecasting, like the values are smaller than real. But yeah, this is a work in progress. And then, and this is also using only the Dendrometer sensor. So we do not have weather information. We do not have other types, like the other sensors are not being used in this prediction. It's just the Dendrometer univariate. Why this information is important? Because some plots have very different weather conditions. So talking to the engineers at Scion, like the higher plots, they have a lot more soil moisture than the smaller plots, or the other way around, but they are different, very different. And that may create this difficult when you are trying to predict. So after these preliminary experiments, what are the issues? One is that we are using a univariate time series. So it's a known fact that growth is non-linear, and it changes according to the seasons, according to the specific environmental data, conditions. And then we could improve this prediction by including more data regarding like air temperature, air pressure, and so on. Humidity, air humidity, and soil moisture, and using all this data that we have, we can improve the predictions. However, using 5-minute frequency, I suppose it's kind of expected that a tree does not change a lot during a day. The variations are quite small. And the 5-minute frequency kind of creates a big overload in a sense, because you are processing a lot of stuff that are very similar. But the outcome is not that good. So yeah, this is just some random numbers. This is not very long by any means, but we have to take into account that we are including more data, and then this is going to multiply. So one alternative is, one question that we raised from these experiments is, do we need 5-minute frequency? So we made a temporal resolution study, and basically we are dropping data to make the interval 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 3 hours, 6 hours, and 12 hours. No, yeah, 12 hours. And here are the results. You can see that these measures are quite similar, the others not so much. And then this is the mean over all tested sensors. So there's, if you are from statistics, mathematics, there are more than 30 sensors. So this is statistically okay to get standard deviation and mean. And then we go down from 400 seconds per epoch to 14 seconds and to 2 seconds per epoch. So these two models are very, a lot faster than the 5-minute resolution. And the error is not increasing by a lot. So the implications of the 5-minute, like economical implications, one is the battery maintenance, because usually transmitting data over Wi-Fi is very costly. So if we can reduce this battery usage, the batteries can last longer, and there's less costs of sending someone inside the forest to change the batteries. And the other is the storage and processing. So if you ever try to use the cloud, you can see that costs pile up very fast. Suddenly you have like gigabytes of data and costs start increasing. So that's an important thing to consider as well. And we are finishing a paper for ecological informatics with these results. And then we can improve this. And I think I'm going too slow maybe, but basically we can improve this by using summaries instead of just dropping the data. And this is also something we are working on. So for the roadmap, the next steps is we are going to increase to a seasonal forecasting. So we are going to forecast 3 months in advance. Of course, this is going to increase the errors by a lot, but that's expected, kind of. And the implication of this is that we can have this ability to have high valuable decision makers, because they are going to see a snapshot of how the forest is going to be in 3 months. And then we can also, the next steps is to include edaphoclimatic data. So climatic variables like temperature, precipitation, and also edaphic variables like soil water, content, texture, topography, and so on. All of this is to finally include our explainable AI methods, and then finding out what drives the growth and the resource usage. Basically, where's the water going, and what makes the forest grow faster, what makes the forest, what can create some kind of disease or some problems in the trees. And yeah, this is the platform we are working on. It's a work in progress as well. So if the video plays, no, it's not playing. It's open. Okay, maybe I can do like this. Okay, I can preview file. Why is your video playing and mine is not?
I think you need to log in.
Ah, okay. Because of the drive thing. Yeah.
Because you dismissed it, but I give it what I wanted.
Okay, there's.
You don't care. It's not.
No, actually, it's asking me to download.
Download.
It's a 30-second video. We are already spending more time trying to make it work. Okay. Yeah. So basically what's showing here is that we can choose the temporal resolution, we can choose the deep learning model we are going to use. And yeah, there's some parameters encoded in the name. And then we can choose the sensor we want to forecast, and the forecast is going to show here. This is sped up to make it sound update, but in theory, this would update every 5 minutes when new data arrives. Yeah, forecast is not that good. There's a small error here, but yeah, I think that's it from my part. And I'll give it back to Charles.
Thank you, Guilherme and Nick. Are there any questions? Let me just keep an eye on the online questions. I know that these are fairly detailed descriptions of how you guys constructed your models and the implications of using certain models. Are there any questions from the audience?
Hi, Nick, I have a question for you. I think it's a couple of months ago, one of the math students, he used a new model called operator neural networks.
Jason Cruz. I heard of it. It's used by Jason Cruz. Yeah.
And so these are used in physics-informed neural networks. Did you try to use them? Because if you're using Rhine gauge data, it's more or less a good approach, do you think?
Yeah, I've heard of operator network. In fact, I think that was actually it's one of the research that's done by one of the recent sets lecturer that just joined. They just joined the university. But no, I've not used operator network. Although I did try basically a different kind of encoding to the river levels. I did have partial success by transforming the river levels into using doing Fourier transforms, and then predicting those coefficients of those Fourier transforms. There is a slight mixed results in the and say, so while I was able to predict the real components of the Fourier transforms relatively well, the complex components were not properly it was pretty much what called the prediction of the complex parts of the Fourier transforms weren't as good. So we did see some what called phase delays and shifts in the and that. So yep. Yep. Yep, I know. So that was a presentation by Jason Kurz by our call I think 3 months ago. He presented that same. Yep. So yeah, in fact the just saying the impetus to trying out this Fourier saying was pretty much inspired by that talk itself. Thanks for bringing up that. Thanks.
Any questions from the audience online? I haven't seen any, but I have a couple of questions. So Nick, when you so there's a neural network component to your work on flooding, and I'm just wondering, have you done some sort of any kind of interpretation work to try and isolate maybe features in the radar data that is actually most predictive of flood, as opposed to having to deal with the entire data set? Because the current time frame for projection is already not a whole lot in terms of what civil defense can work with, right? And so do you think that by doing some interpretation of the model, you could maybe isolate the signal better and potentially provide a more long-term projection?
Yeah, actually, that's one of the reasons why we are trying to look into the implications of the models, namely what they want to talk about is that if we were to look at the rain, if we were to know that certain rain clouds in over a certain area is more important in certain regions, it might show certain catchment areas that are then needs to be protected, needs to be then this a bit more, this better treating either with more trees or basically to be areas that should not be developed, that should not be developed or requires more mitigations. Currently, we saw that most of the impact of the predations comes directly from the river levels itself, and not so much on the distribution of the clouds. But because it's something that is still ongoing. One of the issues here is that the clouds fly. The speed of the clouds is something in the order of 60 kilometers per hour, and for 6 hours forecast, 60 kilometers is 6 hours of 60 kilometers is 300 kilometers, which is almost larger than our rain area, rain coverage area. So the physics of the water flow model is a bit beyond me. So it's something that we need to work out how much of the flow is caused by surface runoffs, how much of flow is caused by the direct the rainfalls direct on the river surface itself, and that's very dependent on the river and the catchment areas.
Understood.
Yeah.
All right. And Guilherme, my question for you is, that I was kind of fascinated by the 5-minute interval thing. So was there any operational justification for collecting data so frequently?
Basically, they didn't. I think it's like a better safe than sorry. So you want to have data as frequent as possible, and then you can discard it.
Yeah.
Because for the science part, they wanted. I think it was already a goal for the project. I'm not in the project since the beginning, but I think it was a goal to understand that they thought that the highest they could go is 5 minutes, like the most frequent they could go is 5 minutes. And yeah, that could be the reason for getting, let's just use the maximum quality we can, and then we can go down as we.
Yeah, so
as
in
we
many
find out.
ways, the data modeling work you're doing here is
Yeah.
kind of telling them, helping to shape their operational parameters as well, right? Because
Yeah.
it seems like not a lot of sort of a priori design went into that. It was just, this was the lowest setting,
Yeah.
so let's go with that.
Yeah, it wasn't like a budget decision. This is the highest frequency our budget can cover, so let's go with it, I suppose.
Cool. Are there any other questions from our audience online? If not, then we're basically out of time. So I'd like to please think again for our speakers. I have two little memento for you. All right, thank you, and to those online for attending the ERI seminar. Well, we'll look forward to seeing you again in at the next one.